Welcome back! Today's actually my birthday and I made myself a present.
It's a puppet too!
And here's how to make your own. Now this was a really fun build. This build was inspired by the box puppets from Avenue Q. They were used in the song Purpose that Princeton sings. In the show, the character's moving and then all of his moving boxes come to life and start singing. And I thought it'd be really cool to take that idea and think of another way to use it. And I thought making a birthday present would be a fun way to change it up. And I made this puppet just using scrap materials that I had laying around the house. And if there's anything that you don't have, you can also get it really cheap at a local hardware store. I also have some links down below. All right, let's get started. Roll the film!
The first thing I started with was a concept drawing. I wanted to make sure everything was going to work, so it's always handy to make a quick design. At first I was going to use pulleys, but I was afraid the string might fall off the track. So instead I decided to go with this lever system, operated by a trigger, with a little spring as a return. The box I decided to use was 10 inches by 12 inches with an 8-inch height. Here I'm tracing out all the pattern pieces. First is the base plate, and then the side walls. And here's the handle. After that, it's time to cut all these pieces out of wood.
Okay, so this was the sketch we did in the last video. Again, this piece might end up being smaller, but this is essentially how the principles are going to work. There's the handle there, and it's going to be a trigger like this, and when you pull this back this way, that pushes this side forward because of this pivot point. Forward motion is going to push this stick forward, which will essentially make this mouth into an L bracket, pushing that lever and opening the mouth. And of course, the return is the spring right there. I've cut out all the pieces just using things that I had around the house. So there's definitely some other woods that you would have used. For the bottom plate here, I would recommend using a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, but I only had 3/4 on me, which is, I did use 3/4 for this, but it's a little thick for that. It'll work, but it's going to add a little bit of weight. But again, this is just kind of a for fun project and testing out the concepts anyway. Here is my bottom piece, which I cut this little slit in there. That's for this little trigger to slide through after the handle is attached. This is the handle that we made. It's pretty comfortable considering it's just a piece of 3/4-inch plywood. A lot of times when I do this, I use a humongous block of Delrin and then I carve it so I get a lot of more comfortable contours on the side. But that's a tremendous amount of work. That amount of work alone would take me a day or two of carving just to get the handle. And again, for a quick project like this is plenty. This is the back brace. This is the front brace that we're gonna have to cut a slit into as well for the mouth. And these are the rails that just kind of hold it together. Now, of course, this is our box as well that it's all going to be put inside of. So before we go on anymore, let's start assembling this. Now let's see how snug this is before I start cutting holes in this box. And look at that, it fits snug and lines up pretty much right with the bottom, which is really fantastic.
Once you have the mechanism inside the box, you have to cut away a little bit of the bottom flaps in order for it to fit around the trigger. That gray plastic mouth flap piece is about 4 inches wide and about 2.5 inches tall for the mouth, but it extends down to be a total of 7 inches tall. I traced the top part of that mouth flap somewhere along that center line on the front of the puppet, and then I drilled 2 holes in the corners and then cut out the space between the holes. Since this flap is made out of ABS plastic, it can bend really easily with just a simple heat gun. I found that this angle works pretty well. Notice how well it fits into this slot. So now if we attach a hinge, it's going to be the perfect pivot point. I like to use a rivet to attach the hinge because it doesn't stick out as far as the end of a screw does. In order to get the flap to pivot in the right spot, I had to make 2 little brackets that I stacked. This raised the hinge just a little bit so it could rotate perfectly. I did end up using screws to attach to this part. I used 1/8 inch strips of aluminum that were 1/2 inch wide to make the internal mechanism. The bar with the trigger is about 9 inches long, and the push bar is about 7 inches long. They all attach with bolts, and I also use little Teflon washers to make sure that the joints moved really smoothly. After I made sure that it all went together well, I used 2 pairs of pliers to bend the trigger. That way my finger has a little bit more surface area when it's pulling on it. It makes it much more comfortable. Then I just put it all back together again.
Last thing I have to do before we start working the box around it is to put the return in this. And that way I don't have to push with my finger.
The spring I used was about 3 inches long. One end I screwed to the base of the puppet, and the other end I bolted to the end of the trigger. Now the mouth can close all on its own. But I decided to put a little foam bumper up at the top here just to cut down some of the noise. It made a big difference. Now it's time to put the mechanism back inside the box, and then mark out exactly where the mouth is going to go so I can cut the hole for the mouth. Now it's time to prep the cardboard box. It was much easier to prep it once it was flat, so I opened up the box, spray painted the inside, and then used spray adhesive to attach to the wrapping paper all at one time. I was really happy with how this turned out. It was so easy, quick, and it came out really, really smooth. I let the glue sit for a while, and then I brought it upstairs and used an X-Acto blade to cut out the mouth slit. After that, it was time to reassemble the box. I used a ton of hot glue to do that major seam down the middle, and to put together the rest of the box, I just used tiny little glue dots just in case I wanted to undo it later. Next, I slid the mechanism back inside of the box. I carefully cut off the cardboard lip flap so I could attach it separately. This makes it work much smoother. But I noticed the plastic flap was catching on the cardboard box, so I carefully sanded down the edge a little bit until it worked perfectly. Then I trimmed just about a 1/4 inch off of the bottom of the cardboard flap. That left room for the hinge to bend. So then I closed up the box with a couple dots of glue, and now it's time to add details. First thing I decided to add was the eyes. You can learn how to make these eyes from some of my other videos. If you click the link right here, there's a playlist with about 5 or 6 different videos on how to make eyes, including the casting process, the painting process, and even the pupils. Then I glued a little bit of red felt into the mouth. This created contrast when the puppet opened its mouth so you could see it better, and it cut down on the noise.
All right, and that is it. What do you think?
Hey, not bad.
You're alive?
Of course I am. I am a puppet, right?
This is cringy. Why are you doing this?
Aren't you forgetting something?
What am I forgetting?
I need a bow. You know what they say, no bow, no go.
Oh, of course. I actually have a bow right here. How's this one?
Oh, I like that. Put it on, put it on.
All right, here you go.
Oh, yeah.
How do you like it?
Oh, I look beautiful now. Check me out.
Yeah, you look great.
Oh, if I could blush, I would.
All right, enough of that. So a couple things I wanted to say about this, guys. This really was a prototype build. There are definitely things I would do differently, things that I learned along the way. But that being said, I am really happy with how it came out. Something cool that I kind of realized about this is if you want to do a show where the puppet kind of comes to life, it's easy enough to just hold this backward. And by holding it backward, or even just to the side, you know, it looks like a regular present for a show. And then all you have to do is turn it, and then it can kind of come to life. On my website, I created some templates for this puppet, but the templates I made are only for the handle, the trigger system, and the mouth. The rest of the dimensions will depend on the size box that you use. The only thing you'd probably have to adjust is the length of the arm that goes across this way. Again, that's depending on the size box you use. A bigger box, you'll probably need a longer one. A smaller box, probably a smaller one. I can't wait to see if anyone else uses this technique to make their box puppets. If you end up doing it, I would love to see it. So please tag me on Instagram or on Twitter and I'll check it out. Well, that's it for now, guys. I'll see you next time.
Is he gone? Ugh, I hope he doesn't play that music again. You know that music that... No, 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 no! Oh, ah, oh, oh! This music has to die! Ah! Why? 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 Screw cruel world. Why?